The Carolina Panthers dropped another Blueprint episode. We're here to break that down as well as give you all the updates on everything Carolina Panthers. Let's go.
Brace yourself for the ultimate Carolina Panthers experience. Welcome to Two Growls, One Roar, the podcast that hits harder than a Luke Kuechly tackle. We're diving deep into the heart of Panther Nation, bringing you unrivaled passion, insider takes, and pure gridiron fire. From Wilmington to the cosmos, this is your home for the fiercest football talk east or west of Charlotte.
Welcome into another edition of the Two Growls, One Roar podcast, folks. Hope you guys are doing well. For those of you that are a fan of the Carolina Dad Show, we're going to have a new episode of that coming out soon, but we're going to continue the Carolina Panthers content because we are nearing the end of the program, the offseason program for the Carolina Panthers. So we're going to eat up every single day of news and activity that we can. And yesterday, we had the Carolina Panthers drop another episode in their Blueprint series. Now, personally, there's part of me that's like, it would be nice if they moved on from the Blueprint name, primarily because it just still reminds me of Matt Rule. Not specifically, but you think about Jay-Z and the Blueprint and the 7-year plan. Every now and then I'm like, can we move on? But it's a fantastic series. We've seen them do this numerous times now in the offseason, training camp, the offensive line episode. So if you are a Carolina Panthers fan, it's lots of good content. I will tell you, for folks like me that watch basically every single video, every interview, there are bits and pieces to it that are new. Of course, the draft room itself, us not being in the draft room, getting to hear and see what they were thinking, the pre-draft process, the interviews, all that stuff is brand new content. But a lot of the stuff that's intermingled in between, the interviews, the press conferences, all that stuff we've heard before, but they do a fantastic job of piecing everything together. So I would highly recommend it. It's about 35 minutes long, but it's worth it. And again, the team that does this does a fantastic job of putting this together. And throughout this, it does focus, of course, the primary, initial focus here is on drafting Tetairoa McMillan and what that process looked like. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, go out and watch it. Biggest storyline that a lot of fans are talking about coming out of this was the potential trade with the Rams. Rams calling to move up. Dan Morgan really liked their guy, but at the same time was like, if we can get a haul similar to what they did last year with the Rams in the second round, and that wasn't a haul, but it was good. If they can get that, then you move off. And because one player versus 2 or 3 or 4 picks, like we've all talked about, is a much better situation. But they gave the offer back to the Rams. It was a haul. That's all we know. We don't really know. Maybe one day it'll come out, but the Rams rejected it. The Carolina Panthers stayed put, and they drafted Tedo McMillan. Now, the other thing that was mentioned, and part of this is what we've read on Panthers.com with Darren Gant, who put together a nice article, if you've not had a chance to read that as well, going into the draft, and you look at a lot of the mocks, and we've talked about it, it seemed like there was a general consensus on defense and Jalen Walker. That was the storyline for this team. Hey, we're going to go defense. We're going to get an edge. Like those two things paired together. And then every mock draft that we saw come out pretty much had that story. Now, in the back of our minds, there was a group of us that still thought wide receiver, Tedo McMillan. And then we had people in the media that tried to stir us away from him and say, yeah, no, the Panthers should not go this route. Why could they? Why would they? And sure enough, they land on it. And it's really, good series. I would recommend watching it. You also learn just a little bit more. Now, number one, Tepper is there. I don't think you should freak out. They talk about Tepper, his involvement, him as a businessman, making some of these decisions, the trades, again, not necessarily being involved in the football side of who to pick where. But I think any owner is going to be in the draft room if they care about their team, if they want to learn. And that's what he's doing, is learning to become a better owner and letting the guys who know what they're doing take over this. But that pre-draft process was something that was unique because we got to learn a little bit more, not that we didn't know, but some of the things that this staff values. And a lot of what they've talked about are guys that love football. And this is something I personally haven't spent a lot of time talking about with you guys as we go through this podcast journey, but talking about the character, competitive drive, people who gonna demonstrate maximum effort, passion, guys that love the game, all those things put together. And so when you think about, players coming in, and some people were worried about Tetairoa McMillan and a clip of him as a freshman saying he doesn't watch film. He already addressed that, we know, but he was, of course, asked about it through the interview process, not in the video we saw with the blueprint. But he had to answer questions to that. And I think part of building a culture here, especially like when you think about the way sports have changed with NIL and a lot of these guys getting money, guys retiring earlier, like all those things put together, it's a good chance that you could just have guys that come here and maybe you want to play, get their paycheck, and leave. But you really want guys that are dedicated to the sport, dedicated to their craft, and working to improve. So it's great. The Panthers' long-term vision, the plan that's been put in place, we know last year, and we've talked about this, but focus on the offensive line. This year, focus on the defensive line, building on the foundational pieces that you have around. So it's great. It is a fantastic series. I highly recommend that you guys go watch that. But let's get into a little bit of Panthers news now. We're getting into, again, the final week of OTAs with minicamp next week. I would expect media should be available at least one of these days coming up as we close out OTAs. So we would anticipate hearing from a coach or two as well as a player. It's just my initial guess. But OTAs closing out. This is one of the funny things. There's, of course, a bunch of photos being posted, but we now have a new version of Bryce Young, the bearded version of Bryce Young out. And I got to tell you, man, I don't know that the league is ready for bearded Bryce. I joke, but it was funny to see that one posted. So for me, and I know we talked a little bit about this, but where my focus, and I posted some shorts on YouTube yesterday for you guys. If you go out and follow me, I have not posted on other social media with these clips, but thinking about the progress of our secondary, our defensive backs, and two names that, again, continue to stand out, at least thus far, Shaw Smith-Wade and Demani Richardson. And when we go back and look at last year's draft class, you think about, the draft class itself, but the potential now for Shaw Smith-Wade, Demani Richardson, who was undrafted, and of course Jalen Coker in the mix with Xavier Legette, hopefully with a healthy Jonathan Brooks, Trevin Wallace, throwing some of these guys' names around here. But you think about getting 5 or 6 starters or contributors from that group, it's a great starting point for Dan Morgan. And I think that's part of the reason that so many fans are excited about this year's draft and what he could do because of the progress that we saw last year. And so now it's kind of a rinse and repeat phase here. Second time around for Dan Morgan. And anyways, going back to the secondary itself, it seems, and it's very early, but I would guess that your leader is still Demani Richardson to start alongside Trayvon Merrick. It's early, things could change. There's a lot that can happen, but I still think early leaderboard right now in the clubhouse has to be Demani Richardson. And again, you think about having an undrafted free agent that works his way up, goes through the system, and that's one of the things that he's done. His effort, as well as Shaw Smith-Wade, are things that have to be noted. It doesn't mean the Panthers, again, may not want to go out and but pick up another safety in free agency, but at least feeling confident with the guys you have. And he looks good from the little bit of clips that we've been able to see. Speaking and staying in the secondary, you have Shaw Smith-Wade, your nickel, who also is playing the part. And again, thinking about a 5th-round pick that you're able to get significant playing time from, we go back and think about, man, Panthers really got to do this. They got to get this in the draft. They got to do this. And they don't. And so now they're sticking with what they have. Now, one thing to be noted, Carolina Panthers have roughly, right now, I was on SpoTrack over the cap, around $18 million in cap space. There's flexibility. Now, we know Nick Scorton still has to sign his contract, but that's not going to take a big hit on the cap. You're probably talking like $1 or $2 million for this year for a second round, if that, in that range. So now Panthers have some money. They have some flexibility. And again, we know that some of these veteran guys like to wait a little bit. They may not want to come through all your OTAs and your mini camp and all that. They may just want to show up at training camp and get the process started. So positive news. Now, one thing that I don't know, and I don't have a read on it to tell you where things are right now, is in the linebacking room, inside linebackers, with Trevin Wallace. Now, Josie Jewell, we know, is going to be a starter, and then Christian Rose-Boom. I can't tell you, and I really haven't heard a lot or seen a lot in regards to Trevin Wallace. I think we could all hope that he does look better this year than last year, that the game's a little bit slower for him, that he's going to have the help of Josie Jewell and a veteran and Rose-Boom to, be a sounding board off of in the locker room, as well as film room and things like that, and on the sideline. But it gives you a chance to breathe a little bit more. But that's still, like, as we start circling, so like for me, the safety position, still a little concerned, but I'm like slowly moving my way to check the box there. Nickel, quarterback, at least for the starting group, check the box. Not as sold on the depth that we have right now, but I think, again, with that $18 million, maybe there's some things that can happen. Waivers are going to come up. Inside linebackers have to be one of the bigger question marks for me for the Carolina Panthers right now. But again, the same way that I was not necessarily sold on Demani Richardson and Shaw Smith-Wade, there's a good chance that Trevin Wallace is also doing his part and looking the part this year. So we talk about defense. I think the other thing, and we already know about the two rookies that we have here in the outside linebacking room and the potential. I think as we continue to monitor this situation, it's going to be a matter. Is it going to be DJ Wonnum and Patrick Jones as your two starters? Very likely could be week 1. Or are we going to see Nick Scorton? Again, who is the thing about Nick Scorton, he's yet to sign his contract, and he's still out here busting his butt, unlike Shamar Stewart with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I got to tell you, Scorton looks the part. I think it's going to be hard to keep Scorton off the field, meaning it's going to be hard for the coaches to make a decision not to play him early. Still has to see him in game speed, still have to, get him adjusted to the NFL. But just looking at his size and the coach's reaction in the blueprint when he talked about dropping his weight, you have to feel good about that. And of course, the defensive line, the front that we have brought in here, it's going to be good. It really is. In general, across the defense for me, I am leaning towards this being a top 18. I even want to hover into top 15. It's too early to make that big of a jump for me. I want to see it actually play out on the field, play out in later in this year, but it's positive news. So defense updates there. And I guess we've also talked about, I mean, we shouldn't glaze over it. We've talked about it as well, but Trayvon Merrick and what he is bringing to this defense, I think that's just something that we haven't had. Like, no knock on Xavier Woods or the guys that we had here, or Jordan Fuller, all those guys, like Sam Franklin, whoever, your Lonnie Johnson team in the secondary over the top. It's going to be nice to have Trayvon back there. Moving to the offensive side of the ball, we will continue to debate the wide receiver battle. I think the wide receiver room is going to put a lot of pressure on the Panthers to make a decision to keep 6, or I mean, likely 6, but possibly 7. It's hard to imagine 7 wide receivers. I mean, you're really playing with 2 or 3 on the field at one time. There's not like a bunch of situations where you're running 5 wide receivers or anything like that. But there's a lot of value in the guys that are here towards the back of the roster, including a David Moore. And again, I'm not saying that I think David Moore is one of your top 7 or 6 right now. He's on the edge. But even some of the guys that were brought in as undrafted free agents, because there's things that these guys can do in the return game. And we need a true punt returner. And again, that could be Jimmy Horn Jr. It's going to be a competition. It still is right now. But you just think about the dynamic. And again, the room has kind of opened up with Tetairoa McMillan. You watch him compared to Xavier, and it's not a knock on him, but his fluidity, his ability to catch the ball with his hands, there's just some things about him. And again, still not even talking about Hunter Renfrow. I'll continue to say, for me, one, I want Jalen Coker to be healthy. I also but I do want him back out as quickly as possible, as safely as possible, because every day that he sits, again, I know the coaches know and they're watching and they know he's a good football player, but you just worry a little bit when you bring in this much talent and there's a competition, how that could impact him long term. Now, we've talked about this as well, but it's good to keep it fresh in our minds as we talk about a tight end room absent of Tommy Tremble, because there's not a lot of depth here as well. So right now we're going to see a lot of Jatavian Sanders, which is great, and a lot of Mitchell Evans. And that 1-2 punch there between those guys, and then hopefully with a healthy Tommy Tremble heading into training camp next year, should be a nice room. But like you think about all these guys we put around, and the Rico Dowdle and the stability on the offensive line, and you draft ETN, brought in a bunch of receivers. Again, I still believe that this offense is going to look much better. I do. And it's not that they were bad, but I do think they're going to take another big step forward this year. And I'm not saying a top 5 or a top 10 offense, but I am saying they're heading in the right direction to be top 15. And a lot of that, I think, is going to lie on the shoulders of Bryce Young. Now, it's way too early, but the week 1 matchup between the ETN brothers is also something that's kind of mulling in the background, with Trevor ETN and Travis ETN squaring off in Jacksonville. We've seen Jacksonville, and probably too early to really scout or give you a preview, but we have seen Travis Hunter moving around on offense as well as on defense. I saw a clip yesterday of him playing on the defensive side of the ball. There's going to be a lot of storylines to watch. Again, Liam Cohen, his offense, he's really good. Can he translate that into Jacksonville, and especially getting them prepared by week 1? The only other news that we have to close out today's episode, and it's not news, but it's something, again, these position battles, there's not many position battles right now. The kicking position battles going on, but as far as like key positions, the only other one, and again, we don't know who the early favorite is right now, is Austin Corbett and Cade Mays. Both have upside. Cade Mays is a little bit younger. I think the other thing to remember when you think about the Panthers is that between this battle here is the fact that the Detroit, and I will credit Mike Kay for putting this out, the Detroit Lions just had their starting center retire. So in the event Detroit wants to call up the Carolina Panthers, and again, these are very, very cheap contracts, like 1 year, 3, 4, 5 million-ish for Corbin and Mays. If the Lions want to call up, make an offer for a 5th or 6th round pick, whatever it is, or I mean, you'd want to get a little more, maybe, I don't know if you're getting a 4th, but hey, we're going to give you this for this, or a depth piece, whatever it is, there's a good possibility that the Carolina Panthers could consider it, because you also have Brady Christensen in the mix as well. So there's a lot of guys available who could fill into that role if needed, possibly even calling back up Andrew Raym if he's on the market and available, as, adding some extra depth. He was a center who was here last year on the practice squad. Anyways, folks, that is going to do it for today's episode. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.